Hello and welcome back to the second season of the EduPulse podcast. Feel free to sit back and enjoy our conversations with leading educational thinkers, movers and shakers with a keen focus on helping our ITT and ECT colleagues navigate the choppy waters of education. Our second season kicks off in conversation with Paul Ainsworth. Paul is an experienced systems and school leader and author of the hugely influential No Silver Bullets, 108 Strategies for School Improvement.
Okay, so welcome Paul Ainsworth. How are you, Paul?
Yeah, good, thank you, Adam. It's kind of this middle week of the half term, isn't it? Week 4 of week of 7 seems to be. We feel like we've been back a long time, but it isn't very long at all, is it?
That's it. It's kind of like a horse race where you like those hurdles that you're now at look really, really tall, but when you started the race, they were like, "Yeah, I can do those." So
what I can guarantee, gents, is that we don't look like how we did at the end of August. Like if there was a photograph of us at the end of August and now, I think those images would be very, very different. Thank you.
I was having a conversation with somebody earlier at the start of the week, and we were saying, if it wasn't payday on Monday, wouldn't Monday have felt like the most depressing day of the half term? That was the thing that got us through, wasn't it? Rainy, horrible, halfway through. Yes, the summer body's disappeared, hasn't it?
Yeah, I must say that we get paid weekly, and it stops being an incentive. I've got to tell you, when it happens that often, it's more like, oh God, I've been paid again. I've got to carry on then, I guess.
They've got me for another week. Oh. Yeah. So, Paul, just to give listeners a bit of a background on you, then, so you're a really experienced systems and school leader, and you are the author of the hugely influential No Silver Bullets, which is 108 Strategies for School Improvement, and more recently, No Silver Bullets 2.0. So, do you just want to give listeners a bit of an overview of what's your story?
Yeah, I'm really passionate about improving schools. Go back to start of my career, secondary maths teacher in a really troubling school. What a really low performing school. I think GCSE pass rate was 14%, 1-4. That was where I started off. Yeah, they did exist. They still do exist. But worked my way up, head of maths, head teacher. And then joined one of the big multi-academy trusts to work across sponsored academies, the type of schools that have been failing for quite a long period of time. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed working in a range of schools and meeting lots of different people. Was asked to work in primary schools as well, which was really interesting to kind of translate my skills from secondary to primary. I think secondary do amazing things. I think primary schools do amazing things. And I think if we can learn from both sectors, I think there's some real gold dust there. There's some real magic. And so I'm very open to new ideas, very open to look at how people are trying to do things. And then I've worked across 3 more multi-academy trusts and find myself today as education director in a 13-school primary MAT. So not done secondary for a couple of years. So 13 school primary MAT in Lincolnshire, some coastal schools, some deprived schools in Boston, and some nice, rural, very nice schools as well. So we've got a real mix. And I just consider myself lucky every day to work with some fantastic head teachers and some fantastic school leaders and teachers and get to visit different schools and get to speak to people like you. Do quite a lot of writing. So yeah, No Silver Bullets, those 2 books are out and have been, just given me opportunities to talk at different things and talk to different people that maybe I wouldn't have had the opportunity to. So yeah, great to be on here, and I feel privileged as well to be following the footsteps of David Didow and Jim Knight. Listened to those last week and got a bit of imposter syndrome and thought, oh no, what will people think of this? So yeah, real pleasure, Adam and Chris. Thanks for kind of giving me the opportunity to talk to you.
You're welcome.
It's absolutely our pleasure. And it's one of the things that, like, this is actually the first time that we've spoken in person, or sort of virtually in person. But one of the things that, like, I've always got from you, and I know Chris the same, over sort of various Twitter and other platforms, and it definitely comes across in what you've just said there, is this kind of idea of being like the spark of positivity. Like, you're right at the very kind of top of an organisation, but like your positivity for the entire sector of education like really comes through. And I wonder, like, the extent to which you see that as like part of the role of trust leadership, around kind of being that sort of spark of positivity, with the idea that it kind of bleeds down through the organization.
I am known as an optimist. There's no doubt about that, and I can't change that about myself. We kind of have a regular meeting, our trust leadership, and go, each week and talk about the challenges that we're facing and what we're doing to them. And I'm the real optimist in the group. There was a little phrase quote that I heard, I think it was 2 years ago: pessimists, glass half full; pessimists, glass half empty; optimists, glass half full; and then hopeful people fill the glass. And that's what I try and do. It's tough. It is really tough being a head teacher. Whatever anybody says, it is an amazing job. It's an amazing privilege. And I hope you two both get the opportunity to do that in your careers. To me, it's the best job in the world, but it is tough. And I think that's what I get the opportunity to do, is to try every day to boost those people. It's that, put your arm around people and tell them you're doing a good job. Keep going. We kind of always remember that from the sports field, don't we? It's that personal, when it's a muddy, rainy day, or you're playing cricket and you've been in the field and it's 30 degrees C, or I don't know, you're kind of in an orchestra and it's a really tough piece of music and you're practicing away. There's always somebody in that group who puts their arm around you and says, come on, you can do it. This is going to be really great. This piece of music's going to be amazing. We're going to have a great cricket win. And that's what I try and do. I think it's too easy to talk about all the negatives, and I know they're all there. I'm not blind to that. As I said, being a head teacher, I think, is an amazing privilege, but it is also such a tough job. But I think they need people who are going to say, yes, you can do it. Just keep plugging away. Keep getting there. And what I try and do is just try and share a few shortcuts. I tried this worked really well. If we do this, and this in your school, it might work even better. You can try that. This was my experience and it didn't work very well. So how can we learn from that? That's what I'm trying to do. I didn't find headship easy. I found it a real challenge. I've been a head, I've been an exec head in a really challenging school for a period of time. But anything that I can do to help those people. There's a really great kind of research paper called Reservoirs of Hope. It was written by Alan Flintham, a Derbyshire head teacher, who was inspired by a number of people. And I think that's what we've got to do. We've got to make sure our school leaders have reservoirs of hope. And people like me, our job should be to help refill those reservoirs of hope of those people.
See, I love that, Paul, because Adam and I were doing a bit of work at the moment. We're doing quite a bit of thinking about coaching, and we're doing quite a bit of thinking about education improvement generally. EduPulse was founded on trying to broaden the conversation and not have a binary world, which is what we were finding through our studies, which is where we met. We had a conversation the other day where I was just like, I don't know what this thing is because I'm constantly told what it isn't. So I can't latch on to something because well, this is terrible. This is terrible about this. This is terrible at explicit instruction. This is terrible coaching. This is terrible understanding of cognitive load theory. This is, and everyone is trying to make a space for themselves. And in so doing, they're saying controversial things to get a bit of leverage on social media. They're saying things that fill a negative gap. And it's so refreshing to remember that other side, to remember your job as a leader, to allow other people to step into your space with a psychological safety that you aren't just going to pull the rug from underneath them and change everything about it just because it's what you think. And to hear that there are people like you out there where your job is to go into a school and go, how can I make you better, by not pointing out the negatives or by not pointing out the inverse. And as I said, to repeat that point, like, I can't latch onto anything if people tell me what it isn't. I don't work like that. And so it's how important do you think that is to your role? Because it is out there, isn't it? There's a lot of negativity on all of the positive things. It's hard to get away from.
We can't do our job if we don't feel confident. We can't do our job if you're racked with negativity and racked with worry. Yet we've seen too many school leaders in that position. So I think that's what I'm trying to do, and lots of other colleagues like me are trying to do that. And you're right, education's so polarized, isn't it? There's a really great bit in your podcast with David Didow where he talked about the different definitions of slant, didn't he?
Yeah.
And he kind of gave two descriptions, and I remember writing them down, from either side of the perspective. I think one he said, was the best way of keeping control of children, and the other one said it was a fascist torture of children, and that's not really going to help us anywhere, is it? To kind of take that polarized response. I think because then teachers worry, head teachers and school leaders and teachers worry even more that they're choosing the right approach, whether they're choosing the right approach, and they see it criticised on social media and think, oh no, I must be doing the wrong thing, I must be doing the wrong thing. But I think we'd all agree there's a middle ground, isn't there?
Yeah.
There has to be a middle ground where we learn from different different commentators and different writers and different researchers. There isn't the right answer. And what might be the right answer in one community, in one school improvement journey, might be definitely the wrong answer in another part of the school improvement journey. And I think that's what I'm also trying to do, while being that positivity, whilst trying to build people up. Love the kind of Man United comment around Sir Alex Ferguson saying to players before they went out and play, just enjoy yourself, lads. And it's a little bit of a flippant comment, but how often do we say to school leaders, enjoy, standing up in front of your school on the first day of term, enjoy that moment. When those results come in and they're really good, enjoy the moment. If you've had a positive Ofsted experience, enjoy the moment. I don't think we do that enough. And I think as well, lots of school leaders, they don't believe it. They don't believe what they're doing is good. And I'm sure you must feel like that. And actually, you need somebody who's kind of maybe got no hair, or hair is all grey, to actually say, you're doing a cracking job. I've worked with countless school leaders. What you're doing is phenomenal. It might not show there in the numbers yet. Staff might not be entirely happy, but trust me, you are doing a great job. Just courage of conviction, stay with it. You will get there, because I've seen other people do this and it will get there. So just so important to to do that. And that polarization, I think, is so hard for school leaders, and that's what we need to find our way through, is my kind of opinion.
It's so interesting because, like, I think at all levels of leadership as well, there's that responsibility to the layer underneath the layer that you're on as well. And obviously it absolutely starts from the top, and that idea of that positivity kind of bleeding down. But people have to think about it as well in terms of like what that actually means for their job. So for example, my job role is a lot of my job role is around leading PD across the school, and a lot of that is around instructional coaching. And I've done quite a lot of work at the school over like the last few months, sort of the back end of last year and beginning of this, on this idea of on like, what are you in a classroom to observe when you go in to observe someone that you're coaching, like, and trying to get this mindset shift of you're in that room to listen, to observe, to think with the purpose of understanding, not with the purpose of formulating a judgment, right? You're just there to understand. And it's a really, really tricky mindset shift for people to make. And I think that's because as a sector, we've kind of been indoctrinated into this sort of world of constant judgment and evaluation. And I just don't think it's particularly useful. And I kind of think to myself, right, well, if I work like that, if I keep trying to work like that and constantly just think, right, my job is to understand, number one, then the coaches that are kind of enacting the coaching program that I want them to enact, they're going to do that as well. It's going to be easier for them to do that, and then eventually, and I think you're right, it takes time sometimes. You're going to get that culture where suddenly teachers are completely relaxed when people come into their classrooms, which, like, you go back 10 years ago, I don't think there were many teachers in the country that were completely relaxed with someone else in the room.
If I go back to the beginning of my career, how many times do you think I was observed in my NQT year?
Or I would have said minimum
6.
I would have said absolute minimum 6, but probably more likely 12.
A fellow teacher came into my classroom once in the entirety of my NQT year.
No way.
Wow.
Yeah, the new head teacher.
Wow.
New head teacher
Okay.
decided he was going to observe every teacher in the school. That was the only time that I ever got observed in my first year of teaching. I had a door with no window. I closed the door and got on with teaching. I had no idea whether I was doing a good job. The deputy head took me to one side after week 3 and said, "Oh, we don't give you any extra time because you're an NQT. You all just have to teach the same timetable because we're a small school and we can't cope." Well, after a few weeks, we think if you're doing a good job, we'll just put you on the cover rota as well. So not only do you don't get any additional time, but also you're on cover now because it seems like out of control of class. It's
Nice.
like how times have changed. So you go from that thing, you go in at 5 to 9 in the morning, you close your door, you teach 2 lessons, you open it again and go and get a cup of coffee, you close your door again for 2 lessons, go and get some lunch, close your door again. Nobody knows what's going on in your classroom. I didn't know what was going on in anybody else's classroom either, to be honest. And how far have we moved now? I walk around, today I've been walking around the school with a head teacher and we're just kind of talking to children, talking to teachers, having a look what's going on. No clipboard, no notebook, just talking, what we're seeing, what we're understanding, how's it looking, how does it compare to last year? How do I think the teachers are settled in? All that. It's just, and the teachers, they're just used to it. Oh, it's Paul. Hi, Paul. How are you doing? And you get those greetings, don't you? And the children start to recognise me as well. This is one of 13 schools that I work in. And, the children, they do today it was, "Morning, Mrs. Paul, morning, Mr. Ainsworth," type thing. And it's just seen as normal. We're just we're kind of seeing what it's like. And I'll leave a few pointers. So, at the end of that school visit, I wrote on the whiteboard in the staff room and just picked out, some things that I thought were real positives about what I was seeing. I think that's the other thing that, talking about observation, we're not very good at just talking about the positives. I think in education, we have this habit of telling people what they're doing wrong, and we focus on the negatives. It's a bit of a deficit model, isn't it? We focus on what people aren't doing well, whereas there's a lot of good research and writing that says, no, what we need to focus on is what people are doing well and do it even better. That's the way to kind of make it an incredible system. And, obviously I talk a lot about sport, but in the world of sport, you didn't get, Shane Warne, you didn't say, oh, your forward defensive's not very good. They didn't say that when it bowled to Mike Gattin or whatever, I think that's what we don't do enough of. We don't focus on the positive and making people even better and better at what they're good at. And certainly that's something that I try to change that way of thinking.
It's such a great point because, yeah, you're right. If you can leverage what you're doing well and do more of it, or like get to the bottom of what it is that makes that so good and transfer that into other areas, then yeah, you get improvement that way. There was Paul Anacone, who's a coach who used to coach Pete Sampras, and when he started working with Sampras, he was like, right, so we need to work on this backhand, Pete, because at the moment you're just chipping it and then running into the net, right? Sampras, for anybody that doesn't know, was like one of the greatest players of his generation, and probably one of the greatest of all time until Federer rocked up. But Sampras's response to that was, I'm not going to hit enough backhands for it to cause me a problem because my serve's so good and my forehand's so good. And so he just didn't do it. He just didn't work on it. And Yeah, absolutely. He just was really, really good and doubled down at the stuff that he was really good at, and kind of generated improvement that way. I love, like, from a lot of what you're saying is it's about, it seems to me anyway, that the actions that you're talking about taking as school leaders, it keeps coming back to this kind of underpinning ethos and belief about what you want the place that you lead to feel like. And it seems like this idea of positivity and building from strength, like that is a really central principle to how you lead the organization that you lead. Our next question was going to be like, what is school improvement? But I think maybe we should rephrase that and go, what should school improvement be? And then maybe we'll come to like, what is school improvement in, like, at the moment in the kind of wider sector. So should we start with like, what should school improvement be?
So I think we've got to start that. Where do we always start from? We start with the why, don't we? As kind of Simon Sinek says. So what I've been talking about so far, the positivity, the kind of how we do things, I think that's part of the why. And it's that relationship that we build with people that then allows us to do school improvement. Until we've formed that
Nice.
relationship and become a trusted colleague. I've tried to do school improvement when I've not been trusted. And it's so hard because everybody is second guessing the advice you're giving. And you spend more time trying to justify the advice you're giving than you do giving the advice. So to me, the most important part of school improvement is building the relationship with the colleagues. And to be a little bit controversial, this is why Ofsted can never be a force for school improvement, because there isn't the relationship between inspectors and school leaders. That's kind of how I feel at the moment. I know Ofsted inspectors, I work with one, when they take off their Ofsted inspector badge and work in a school as a school improvement, she's amazing and she's a force for school improvement. But when she puts the badge on, it's just a judgmental thing, isn't it? There isn't a relationship. There isn't a level of trust. That's not there. So when I think of school improvement, what comes first? It's building the relationship, the why, as Simon Sinek would write about. And then to me, there is the how, and the how is the process. And I think, in anything, you need a process. And this is maybe back to my mathematical background, but I think you need some kind of process to underpin what you're doing. So the process that I write about in my most recent book is a 4-part process. And the first 4 parts of it, or the first sections of it, you won't be surprised by at all. What do you do to start off with? You evaluate. What do you do next? You have a plan. Once you've got a plan, you execute it. And then when you've executed it, you review. There's nothing rocket science in there, is there? That's all normal improvement methodology. However, what I think is really important in schools, that goes back to the trust thing and the relationships, is school improvement is emotional. It's not just a scientific 1 + 1 = 2. It's not that simple. There's a lot of emotion there. So when I talk about evaluate, I'm talking about evaluating with honesty. And we can only evaluate with honesty if we trust the person we're working with. Otherwise, you're just trying to pull the wool over their eyes, aren't you? That's what you're trying to do. So evaluate with honesty. With a plan, the plan's got to be right for the environment you're working in. You and the two of you work in very different schools. You couldn't take the plan from your school, Adam, and put it into Chris's, and vice versa. So the plan has to be planned with empathy. Now, I don't think every colleague who does my job gets that right. I don't think they show that true empathy for the school that they're working in, for a whole range of reasons. And part of it is because they just want the school to improve as fast as they can. But I think to get that really sustainable school improvement, you've got to really show the empathy in that plan and get it really precise and bespoke for that environment. Then if we're looking at execution, and this comes back to some of the comments I was making earlier, we need people to execute with confidence, not second guessing, not with fear. This is why the optimism and energy is so important. I need teachers to, when they're teaching a lesson, think, I am a great teacher. I'm going to teach a really good maths lesson now. I'm going to teach a really good PE lesson. I need my head teachers to think, I'm going to do a really good assembly. I'm going to be fab in front of the parents tonight, because we do our best when we're confident, don't we? So for me, it's not execute, it's execute with confidence. And then the last thing that, again, we're not always great at it in education, review, but review with humility. So whatever I say here today, I will have made more mistakes in my career than the things I'm saying right, because that's what we do. We don't get it right, and I can give you countless things where I've got it wrong. But but all the time I'm thinking, while we're trying to improve a school, if I'm reviewing it, humbly, what I can say what I haven't got right, and the head teacher can say what they haven't got right. They don't need me to tell them that. I don't need the head teacher to tell me that. I'm more than aware of all the things I get wrong. But I think if we can get that those two aspects of a really clear process, but also manage the emotions, I think that gives us more sustainable school improvement than the boom and bust that we sometimes see.
I think you're completely right, because to bring it to a real world experience, my school had a terrible Ofsted experience in, I think it was as fast as 2023, and we got a requires improvement. So we're an independent school, but we choose Ofsted because they don't cost as much as ISI do. And the inspector just didn't get us. They didn't get us. Oh, this is a bit broken. This is a bit creaky. This doesn't work. You put NA here on your SCR. It should be something else, or some of the check. I can't go too much into detail because we've still got a complaint ongoing. But she went, well, that's leadership and management RI, so the whole thing's RI, and I don't like you, so bye. And that's what we kind of felt. And my head teacher really fought. She was on to DFE every day until we got assigned a case manager, because she was like, there was no effort of humility made. It was just a judgment call. We then got a kind of a section 5, and she spent the day with us, and she kind of winked to us. She was a good as I go person and gave us a couple of hints. And then we finally had an inspection in February of this year that featured an inspector who understood small schools that were had to do the independent standards, alongside another inspector. So not 3 this time, but 2, because there's only 60 children in our school. So, you don't spend 4 days with us, because that's really weird. And her feedback, she cried during, and she gave us good overall with outstanding behaviour in the old system, which obviously we're grateful has now been canned. But I think the reason why I say that is because she couldn't, with her humility, she couldn't take a step back from it. She sat in it entirely and just went, the people, they're amazing. These kids are incredible. Like, I don't know what to say. She cried several times just trying to give us the feedback, because she couldn't believe what she was seeing, because they were from challenging backgrounds, or they had whatever it was. But what you just said to me really hit me in the heart, because that's what we experienced. We experienced an inspector who was ready to drop their inspectorate hat for a moment. Don't get me wrong, she put it back on for other places. This book isn't very neat. Your standards need to be... And I'm like, oh, right. Well, and my argument that we use books as an extension of the working memory didn't quite wash with her just yet. I think that might have been an advanced step too far for her. It's fine for doodles. It's what their brain looks like. She wasn't quite ready for that. But she what you just said about kind of evaluating with humility is what she sat in, because we experienced that with her, because then we cried as well, because it was a very emotional outlet, because you've got a gun to your head. And it's so important for leaders to know that what they're doing is good. And I've I say with Adam, I'm not a coach, but I've had one of my teachers come up and go, can you just come and look at one of my lessons, please, outside of our usual kind of very laid back observation cycle. I'm really struggling here. And it's just turned into a friendly conversation that has now happened weekly and is now regular. And because he's come to me because of the relational trust, I can turn around and go, this is what's working. You've told me this isn't working. What do you think will fix this? And he's gone, maybe this. Try it. I'll come and have a look next week. And that trust has fostered. It's something that the other teachers have called a bromance. That's how much they've recognised the change in relationship. And he's great. Shout out for Mr. Tom. He's really coming on as a teacher in the best way possible, because he's taken it, he's running with it, and he's adapting and moving. But he's done that from a position of relational trust, I hope, and think. And he's an outstanding practitioner, though he doesn't quite realise it yet.
And that's Paul's point there about evaluating with honesty, right? If every teacher evaluates themselves with honesty, but to evaluate with honesty, and correct me if I'm getting this wrong, Paul, but to evaluate yourself with honesty, you also have to have that confidence that underpins all of this, and that, and the trust that underpins that as well. Can I just throw a word in then that I think is in everything you said, and just to recap it? So you've talked about the importance of evaluating with honesty, planning with empathy, executing with confidence, and reviewing with humility. So what role then does accountability play within all of this? And like, how important is it that you that schools sort of define this word accountability? Because it's a word that I personally think is hugely misunderstood in a lot of schools. But I know that a lot of people listening to this will be going, yes, all of that sounds fantastic. That would definitely be an environment that I would develop in. But if the system at large is saying, but you've also got to make sure you got this accountability thing, sometimes that can feel like, we can't get to that holy grail that Paul's talking about then. But maybe there's a way. What do you think? What is accountability, and what role does it play?
So if I wrap all this up, this is what I call the heart and soul of school improvement. That's kind of my process. It's the heart and soul of school improvement. But the heart of school improvement is children doing better. The heart of school improvement is children performing as well as they can. I work in a county where outcomes at primary are lower than national. That's the county that I work in. If I look at primary outcomes, they're lower than national. Secondary, not a massive difference. Primary, below national. So that means there's a group of children in the county where I work in who leave primary school disadvantaged to their peers in the neighbouring county.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's what I'm accountable for. I'm looking across 13 schools in a multi-academy trust, but I'm also looking at the county as a whole. I do some work for the Teaching School Hub because I believe that, even though I work in a multi-academy trust, I think we're part of the sector. We do school improvement work in schools outside of our trust. I've had schools that have had an Ofsted. They've panicked. They've picked up the phone. They've said, "Paul, can you come and help?" Not in my trust. I've spent 3 days with them, just helping them through. I'm not really allowed to be part of the process, but I can coach and I can give people a hand. So accountability to me is how the pupils are performing. And yes, we can't get away from that. We all want, that's our why, isn't it? We all want the children to perform as well as they possibly can. The way children perform in Chris's school might be different from the way that children perform in your school, Adam. Mm-hmm. And if I look at, kind of some of the, one of the really deprived schools in that I work with, those children they're behind on the starting grid when they rock up at school. Yeah. If it's a 400-meter race, they're not, on the inside bend staggered behind. They're even further back than that, but still in the outside lane. So that to me is accountability. Accountability is how well are the children doing, and we can't get away from that. Now, yes, there's a whole set of measures, aren't there? Because there is, in primary we talk about children being secondary ready. At secondary school, we're talking about children being ready for the next stage of their life. So my daughter on Saturday will go to university will spend her first day at university. Yes, she's got the A-level grades to go to university, but I'm hoping that everything her school's done and everything that we've done as a family will make her ready for the next step of her education.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got friends whose children are going from primary to secondary school. 3 weeks ago, colleague I work with, daughter, big secondary school. So for her, is she secondary ready? Now, for both of those things, there is an element of secondary ready, university ready, having the right grades, being academically able to succeed. But there is also that whole range of other stuff, isn't there? You know, that confidence, that being able to talk to people, that being a flexible learner, that understanding study skills, knowing yourself. So to me, that's accountability. How are we preparing children for the next stage of their lives with having the best academic outcomes they can have, whilst giving them a rich curriculum, you know, whilst making sure they know how to paint and that they know how to throw a ball and that they know some, you know, they know history and geography and that, you know, they've got some basic computing skills, you know, all those kind of things. So I suppose that's my point on accountability is children. You know, are children prepared? Can they achieve? Are they achieving?
And is it, I suppose, so again, just to kind of try and draw a little bit of that together, from a lot of what you're saying, it's like we all share the same sort of thing that we're accountable for, right? We're all accountable as anybody that works in schools and with children. We're all accountable for the outcomes of the pupils that are in our care. And those outcomes are kind of defined by context. So our kind of lead measures, if you like, are defined by the context. So, you know, the outcomes, what Chris would look at as outcomes in his school might be different to the outcomes that I would look at in my school. But ultimately, everybody that works with children is accountable for the outcomes of the young people that they've had a hand in. So because everybody shares that same mission, that same thing that we're all kind of accountable for, does that then create more of a kind of a almost like a circle of accountability where we've all got this central aim in the middle and we're all accountable to each other for what we're putting into that? So as a head teacher of a school, yes, you're accountable to the pupils, but you're also accountable to the teachers, because if you don't do your bit, they can't do their bit. And likewise, the teachers are accountable to you as well, because if you're doing your bit, they've got to be doing their bit as well. So it's almost everybody is accountable to each other for the little bit of that really big puzzle that everyone's kind of forming a part of. So by that, in that way, does accountability become more of a relationship, which again comes back to that central theme that you were getting at earlier? Is it more of a relationship rather than like a transactional requirement from the person above you?
There's kind of two responses to that accountability, you know, comment, isn't there? First of all, there's the spider's web of accountability, isn't there? That,
Yeah.
you know, we're all connected to each other. We all
Absolutely.
support
Yeah.
each other.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, Adam working in a primary school, year 6 outcomes are not produced by a year 6 teacher, are they? They're
No.
produced by everybody who's taught.
Yeah.
You know, Chris, if you your children are doing some GCSEs in a through special school, it's not who taught them maths in year 11, is it? That kind of enabled to get that GCSE grade. It's the whole spider's web that kind of goes on. And the kind of cheesy comment around that is the great comment about JFK at Cape Canaveral, isn't it? Where he sees the guy who's mopping the floor. You know, great space race. They're trying to put man on the moon. You know, JFK, probably the most charismatic president of all time, goes up to the guy, the janitor, with the mop and bucket and says, "What are you doing?" And the guy says, "I'm helping put man on the moon." You know, and it's a brilliant story. How true that is, we will never know. But it's a fantastic story that everybody is playing their part. And I think in the truly fantastic schools, so I've created a new accountability judgment here. Fantastic schools.
Yeah.
You know, everybody is playing their part, aren't they? And we can all, you know, I've worked in so many schools over time, and the fantastic schools are the ones where everybody is part of the team and everybody's making a difference. You know, I can think of a secondary school back in the day where my site manager used to referee football matches. You know, not part of his job, but he liked football. He was DBS checked. He'd referee our inter-house football matches and that kind of thing. You know, we can think of teaching assistants that play a really full part in the extracurricular activities. If we go into secondary school, things like Duke of Edinburgh, you know, once was the preserve of the teacher, but now it's that whole wide range of stuff. Those are the fantastic schools, aren't they? Everybody's putting something in. That's that spider's web that really helps children achieve.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
In our school, we have something called the Cover Everything Protocol, the SEP. We're very small, so if Sally, the head teacher, she's out, she's doing something, or I've got something to do, and all of a sudden our classes need a bit of a boost, or there's a residential going on. There's a culture within our school, and I'm very lucky that. Well, I say lucky, it's been built up over time, but I'm lucky in the position we are now, whereby it's like, fine, there's only 3 left in year 6, come into my year 7 and I'll adapt it. And everybody just goes, yep, let's go for it. And there's no, I'm from a performing arts background, and so there's no small parts, only small actors, right? But it's that same kind of idea, is like, I've got a big role to play here, because I've just allowed the deputy to go and make this phone call that they've been waiting all day to take, etc., etc. And I think that always comes back to that unattributed quote of, never underestimate how hard someone will work if they feel appreciated. So from a leadership point of view, trying to be like, thank you so much for everything you've done today. It's been brilliant. And to have then a school improvement person come in like yourself and point that out and write it on the board and go, I've noticed these incredible things that I'm really proud of you for. They're awesome. Keep doing these things, because keep mopping the floor of the space station, keep mopping the floor of the rocket launcher is I guess what you're saying.
And I think within that, and I read something really interesting last week about a difference between being kind and nice. So and there is an element. So really fantastic quote by Brené Brown. Brené Brown says, kind is clear, unkind is unclear.
Yeah.
So whilst, trying to surf a wave of positivity, that we've also got to be clear with people that, when it's not as good as it can be, so there is still that there, that I'm not just, walking around, through the daisies, it's tough, isn't it? But so we have to point out when we think we can improve, but it's how you point that out, isn't it? And I think the other thing within there is people being really clear on what effective is, or what good is. Because how many colleagues, do we work with, and they're not quite clear on what they're trying to achieve? They've read books, they've been to training courses, they've listened to people, but actually they're not really clear on, well, what do we think good is? What do we think effective is? And I think that's an important part of the process, as well as, school leaders and everyone being, this is what we want. This is our expectation, within our school. This is what we're all trying to work towards, making it achievable, not superhuman, but, being clear on, and then we can say, that's great, but can you just...
You touched a little bit there on this idea of, like, do people actually know what good means, or what good looks like in your school? So it kind of makes me think about like one of the central challenges of being a teacher, right? Because there is such little agreement on social media, and everyone has different opinions and different feelings on, like, well, what is good teaching, and thankfully we've got a greater access now to the research community, so we understand what the kind of best bets are, but we're still kind of at the mercy of those that are kind of leading organizations in a position like yourself, and at the mercy of those people who perhaps allow their own preferences to override what the research might say, for example, or their own preferences, or their own style, or their own preferences for certain styles to override and to kind of bias what their views are of what they're looking at. So in terms of being a class teacher in a school, that can be really, really challenging. So how important is it, and what should the process be for school leaders to establish a really agreed approach to what good teaching is in their school with their teachers? How important is it, and what should the process be to get to that?
It's central. It's undoubtedly central. I think that takes me back to the titles of the 2 books, No Silver Bullets.
Right.
There are no magic answers. Anybody who tells you differently that use this math scheme, use this exam syllabus, use this piece of software, use this phonics scheme, this is going to be the answer. It's not true. It's just not. There are no magic answers out there. What I think's really important is a community of teachers in a school, first of all, deciding what they're trying to achieve and how they're going to do it. I believe in consistency in a school, where people are all, there is a golden thread of teaching and learning across the school, but that's been agreed by the teachers and the school leaders, that it's really clear. This is what, and you've got a bit of back and forwards on that. I've seen some fantastic examples where head teachers have been to school and said, right, I'd like maths to look like this. This is what I'm thinking. Now can you go away and try it? Try it for a week. Let's see what it goes. Let's have another staff meeting. Right, how did we find it? How can we tweak it? How can we make it a little bit better? Right, let's go away. Now let's work on books. What do we want books to look like? Right, now let's come back in a week. What do we find? What's our agreed principle on what do we want school books to look like? How are they going to be set out? How are we going to set out learning walls, learning environments? Let's try and do one thing, but how we get... And I think that, to me, that's the gold dust, is a level of consistency that's agreed by a teaching team. The head teacher, as you used the word before, Adam, has ultimate accountability. So the head teacher is not going to say to their staff, do whatever you want, walk out the staff room, and then come back and say, have you agreed it all, folks? Because they are the lead teacher. They're the lead teacher. They are leading teaching and learning in their school. In a large school, you might delegate that. So you take a role on leading teaching and learning in your school, don't you, Adam? Because your head teacher's saying to you, right, I want you to research that. And you are leading that. You're going to take the views of your colleagues and you're going to put that together and come up with some time of consistent practice. So then everyone knows, right, these are how we're going to set out our books. This is the style of questioning we're going to use. This is the discipline process we're going to use. Whether we kind of joked about slant before. There's so many different styles of discipline depending on the culture of your school and the culture of the children who are within it and central beliefs. And that to me is the key. And that's how you get that, what a good one looks like, because people have agreed it. Then your challenge comes when new staff join the school, because they've not been part of that original journey. So how do you lay out that information so they're really clear? And, so school I was working in today, they've got, lovely, consistent processes, not the same as the other schools in the trust. They've developed them themselves. They've got 2 new teachers this year. So it's how do you bring those teachers up to speed, experienced teachers, really high quality teachers, but how do you bring them up to speed so they fit into that plan of working? Because if we all work together, the children are going to achieve more and we're going to achieve more, aren't we? Rather than pulling in different directions.
A lot of what you touched on there as well is kind of what we've talked about before, Chris, isn't it? Around like you've got to, we can get obsessed with like consistency of action when actually what we want is consistency of thought. Like we want everybody to have a shared understanding and a shared belief about what good teaching is. Because if everybody's got that same shared understanding, then the decisions that they make in the classrooms, they can have more agency and autonomy over those decisions, because we know that everyone's decisions are rooted in the same core beliefs and the same core understanding. And I think that something that school leaders maybe don't do enough of is spending the time really developing people's beliefs. So I think we can go straight sometimes to like, right, we need to try and influence people's actions. We need to try and change practice and make practice better. But that's not sustainable if people's beliefs about how teaching or about how learning works and about how teaching can be most effective aren't aligned to the actions that you're asking them to take.
Isn't that shine though? Adam and I, we met on a Masters for Educational Leadership, and the bread and butter of some of the culture stuff we studied was Edgar Schein and what he spoke about in 2010. And so often you go in and you see these surface level, let's change the uniform, let's change the logo, let's change the posters, let's change the paint. And by the time you get down to that the deeper layer, the unspoken values of the school, those are the things that need to embed. And I guess, Paul, that's what you were saying, correct me if I'm wrong, at the beginning, where you were like, I can't improve until they trust me. So you've got to build into your improvement plan a period of time of that building trust and activities where people build the trust with you before you can turn around and go, great, so now this is what I think you need to do, because that is a part of getting into their, I guess, shines deeper levels of culture and really trying to shift their thinking, which will then become shared language so that you can go, great, we are on the same page, let's go for it then.
I think it's about that then leads into like your culture of teaching and learning, right? So it's like these are the shared principles that we've got because we've all spent this time like learning about this stuff ourselves. We believe in this particular piece of research or this particular principle because it is, informed by this piece of research, or we've taken what the research says and we've tweaked it we've tweaked the application to suit our context, and so now collectively we believe this. I think then it seeps through into your culture and becomes aligned with it. But I think that period of time where you're spending really developing those shared beliefs, that's what makes teaching and learning change sustainable.
My kind of really practical example at that would be developing curriculum. So over the last, basically coming out of COVID, that's been the big thing with whatever type of school you've worked in has been developing curriculum, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
Whether you're a primary school, secondary school, grammar school, SEMH school, it's all around developing curriculum. Now, in that development of curriculum, if you kind of think of the Simon Sinek stuff and I can think of where schools haven't got it right, the why for developing the curriculum has been because Ofsted want it. How many times have you kind of heard or, on Twitter, oh, we're doing this for the curriculum. Why are you doing it? Because Ofsted said we need it. Really common. The other end of the extreme is people go straight to the what and spend ages focusing on what sentence is being written on a template. And it loses, everything. But if you start in the what I would say is the correct way, you start with, so what's the why? The why of the curriculum. We want children to learn more. We want it to be carefully planned to support teachers to reduce workload so that we can have a broad and balanced curriculum. We've got a why then, haven't we? So then it's the how. How are we setting it up? Are we having long-term plans and medium-term plans? What's within them? How's that going to be established? And then get into the, right, we've agreed all this, we've agreed our processes, we've agreed our templates. Now let's try and, write one. History lead, try and put a history one together, whether you're secondary school or primary school, pick a year group, let's have a go. And it's that process, isn't it? Being really clear on the why, being very clear on the how, and not spending all your time on the wrong why or getting into the detail before you've got your understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much there there's so much there to kind of unpack as well, isn't there? And I love the curriculum example because that is absolutely the reality of what goes on in schools. And I think like where you started off there with like, okay, why do we want to do this? What's the actual reason for it? I think again, like come back to that idea of belief. Like who's going to not believe in that? Like absolutely. And I think if you get people believing, then that's what sustains them into sort of changing out.
Do you not find that as teachers we're sometimes the biggest hypocrites, that we don't practice what we preach? And what you were just saying there, Paul, about was almost, it's knowledge before skills. And like some teachers just like, there's the curriculum, off you go, without looking at the knowledge. And yet in our day to day, we're like, oh, it's knowledge before skills, so we've got to get the knowledge down. And we never, as teachers on the ground, never apply what we're telling other people. In an old life, I was a singing teacher, and when I went for singing lessons, my teacher would tell me stuff, and she'd be like, I know you know this, but I'm going to tell you. And I'd be like, I never do it to me. I never apply my own rules to my learning, and yet I'm teaching it. But I don't practice what I preach as a learner when I then go to my own singing lesson. And I think what we're benefiting from at the moment is teachers thinking of themselves as students and thinking of themselves as lifetime learners themselves, and the ability to go, as you said earlier, what phrase did you use about it wasn't perfect school, was it? What phrase did you use? I can't remember. Where you were just like, oh, this is a much better school. It was just like, those teachers their minds are open to learn. Yeah, do you know what? I'll have a go at that. Why not? And I think sometimes we can benefit from that. How often do you see teachers in settings that have that mindset doing really well compared to teachers that don't have that mindset not doing very well? Is there a correlation there?
Oh, 100% there must be. And that anecdote that I give around the curriculum, I give that anecdote because as a head teacher, I got that badly wrong. I can remember us trying to develop marking and feedback. And I was saying, why are we doing this? Because Ofsted tells us to. And then spending ages looking at, what people were doing, rather than kind of saying, do you know what? Marking and feedback is to help the children learn more. What's the best way of doing it? Then asking the how are we going to do it before getting wrapped up into the what. So the things that I say often come from learning where I've got it wrong, first of all. And so I think that's important to realise. But yes, we need colleagues to be, to be confident. And I see this a lot, again, in the curriculum, in terms of we want teachers to teach interesting lessons. We want teachers to kind of, really get the children visualising and thinking what's going on. And one of the side issues of the way we plan curriculum is it can become what I would say route one. It's kind of get the information from my book, textbook, laptop to the children's, rather than kind of engaging them with that process, because it's all, we've got to get through the curriculum, we've got to get through the curriculum, we've got this to do, we've got this to do, we've got this to do. And that's why I talk about that execute with confidence. I want the teachers in my schools to think, I can do this amazing lesson that really engages the children. And I might not get through, it's primary school, we might not get through the whole history scheme of work, but that bit has been so memorable, in the kind of, Mary Myatt, Christine Council schema of learning. That schema is going to be so embedded in the children, that's worth more than a surface level understanding of more. And it's trying to get teachers with that level of confidence, isn't it, to do that.
That's really powerful.
So in terms of like school improvement and what some kind of misconceptions can be of it, to what extent is school improvement, and I guess how different is school improvement? How different is school improvement in a school that is not currently failing?
And that's always the interesting thing, isn't it? What's a failing school? A failing school is one that somebody's walked in and said it's failing, but there's loads. There are a lot that maybe would be classed as failing, but people pick them up, and get them moving. I think that, yes, I've worked in, I've worked in some incredibly challenging schools. The thing about the incredibly challenging schools is the pressure that people are on to make the improvement faster. And that is a real challenge, because you're trying to bring people with you. And in some of those schools, there aren't a wealth of staff. The staff you've got are the ones that you need to keep. I hear some people say, oh, well, we'll just get new staff. We'll just get new staff. No, the staff we've got are the ones that we're going to keep. So it's how do you try and work at that pace and bring those people with you? And that is so incredibly hard. And going back right to the beginning, the only way you can do that is with a really powerful why and vision. And I think that's why sometimes primary schools that have been classed as inadequate can do the rapid transformation with the same staff, because it's small enough that you can really develop the why that everybody can buy into. That can be harder in a big secondary school, where you've got 100 teachers, to really get people to buy into the why. And that takes a really skillful set of leaders to be able to do that. So, school improvement. That every child needs to achieve well. It's just that pressure and pace that you're under. And one of the things that I suppose I've tried to do over my career as a system leader is almost try and take that pressure a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
To almost, that almost, and I'm putting my arms up to kind of as though I'm protecting somebody.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to kind of protect that head teacher and say, well, what is the right pace of improvement? When I worked in really challenging schools, on the, in the previous Ofsted regime, we had 18 months to take a school from inadequate to RI. That's what we were trying to do. We weren't trying to go from inadequate to an outstanding school in 18 months. We were trying to go inadequate to RI, 18 months. What are the building blocks that we need to put in place, the skills we need to develop in our colleagues to do that? Then we've got another period of time to get it from RI to good. And that's what we used to do. And it's having that sustainable journey in mind, which meant you could manage pace and, and be clear about what happened. Now, I was very fortunate. I've worked in 6 schools that have gone from inadequate to good over time. So I've got a really clear view on what pace is. A lot of people that are working in a school like that, it's the first experience they've ever had of that. And you're just trying to do it as fast as you possibly can, but you end up not bringing people with you. It doesn't stick, and you end up starting again.
But the only thing I would add to that, though, is although you perhaps it can be harder to connect people with the why in a situation like that, surely there is, though, it's easier to kind of get an acknowledgement of the need.
There is, and sometimes the harder schools to improve can be in the current day and age. It could be a single academy trust, so that one school sat that's got an historic good judgment, or a historic outstanding judgment.
Yeah,
for
those,
sure. Because people think, but we've always been good. We've always been good. It always has been. The data's always been fine. And those are the ones where stuff gets missed sometimes.
Don't you think as well that that some of that is because if you're sat in a school that's got a good judgment or an outstanding judgment, or even just a school, perhaps it's not just about the judgments, perhaps it's a school where things are just generally pretty good. Is there not this sort of inevitable thing where it's like, let's take a bit of a breather now, because in this day and age, in this kind of sector, it's inevitable that it won't be too long before somebody comes along and tells us that we're not very good. So let's save our energies for then, rather than trying to get even better now, because it's coming.
But then let's go back to the beginning. Why are we doing the job?
Totally,
we're doing the job to try and help the pupils achieve as well as they can. That's what we're trying to do. So it's having that evaluation with honesty. Are the children doing as well as they can? However, there is a massive caveat to this. The caveat is, one of the most dangerous phrases in education is, it's all about the kids. I've got this really crazy idea. You're going to do it because it's all about the kids. CEO, a really great CEO I've got a lot of time for, stood up at a conference last year, and that's what he said. The most dangerous phrase in education is, it's all about the kids. Because actually, if I haven't got the teachers, the kids have got nothing.
Yeah.
So it's managing those two aspects of, yes, we're trying to do the best we can with the children, but it's got to be manageable for the teachers, because we have not got, we have a retention crisis in our schools of teachers. So what, we can't say we're just going to do this and not worry about the impact on teachers. It has to be sustainable. And those are all the things that I'm trying to balance in the role that I'm doing. What can I ask of head teachers? What can I ask head teachers to ask of their staff? What is reasonable? And because I work across a group of schools, I've got maybe a better idea of what is reasonable, what can we expect of people, what is sustainable, than maybe if I was just working in one school. And hence, come back to the beginning, I'm really privileged to do the job I do.
Yeah.
I think so much of it again comes back to those 4 things. So if you've got that school improvement approach that is, we're going to evaluate with honesty, it actually doesn't matter where you are in the cycle or what your what your current state of play is. If evaluating with honesty is what you do, then that's going to be driving that, rather than you're not sort of evaluating within the context of where you are in the Ofsted cycle, which might mean that actually we're going to evaluate a little bit. We're going to sort of take our perhaps we're going to evaluate a little bit softer at this moment in time because we've just had a really good judgment, so let's take that breather. No, we always evaluate with honesty. It doesn't mean we just continually drive people into the ground, but we evaluate honestly where we're at. And it's a real sort of mental shift for people to make, I think, because it's almost that middle ground between, I just feel like I see it a lot where it's either you have that middle ground where on one extreme you've got the head teacher that says, we've just had a good judgment, let's just take a breather for 6 months, and then all of a sudden it's really difficult to build momentum back up. Or at the other end, you've got someone that goes, we've just had the good judgment, right, onward to outstanding, let's go. And actually those are real extremes, whereas what you're talking about is that sort of middle space, that almost like dialogical space, I suppose, where it's no, we're going to evaluate honestly where we are, regardless of what that judgment has been or where we are in that cycle. It's honest evaluation, and that drives our next step.
Definitely that middle ground. It's the hardest place to be, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Splinters in our behinds and all those kind of things. But yeah, it's finding the middle ground to bring your staff with you.
Amazing. Paul, do you think you should just give us just a few of your sort of biggest success stories that you've come across, just to kind of inspire us with a little bit of hope for the future of school improvement, what it could be?
So, a couple of examples. Sponsored academy in the trust that I work in, called St Nicholas C of E Primary Academy, right in the heart of Boston, tough town. Kind of really, really deprived. Head teacher with a vision, let your light shine. It's a tough estate outside the school. Been failing for a long period of time. When external visitors came into the school, one of the most memorable things was the external visitors talking to children and asking them about where they felt safe. And they said they felt safe in the school. The school was their oasis, and it hadn't been like that in the past. And everybody, you kind of go into their worship and hear the children sing, and you hear the collective view of the teachers. So that to me is an amazing success story. If I go back in time a little bit, I worked in a school in Hull that I was chair of the interim executive board. Effectively, I was a quasi-exec head, was what I was doing, but we called it chair of the IEB. It got the lowest results in Hull City.
Wow.
I got summoned in to see the director of education, with the head teacher, and director of education said, I hope I don't see you here next year. My reply was, you won't see me next year because either the school will be improved or I won't have a job anymore. And it was as simple as that. School had to improve. I think the combined Key Stage 2 combined was 22%. By the end of the year, Key Stage 2 combined was 63%, 64%. School got a good judgment. Staff were in the right places. Staff were happy.
Wow.
There's some transformations. So it is really possible. Right at the start of my system leadership career, I started working with a large complex secondary school in Northampton. I think in my third or fourth week it went special measures, and I'd been brought in to try and help the head teacher, brand new head teacher, me, and in 4 weeks it went in special measures. That wasn't a good start to our journey, not at all. 3.5 years later, school went to its RI, and then after 3.5 years, the school went back to good. Just people kept plugging away, doing good stuff. So you can do it. There's that's 3 examples of schools that have failed that have got back to good, and you can do it in the right way. You can do it with people in the right way, building people up. So yeah, that's when I think it's a really exciting job. It's a really exciting job because I don't get my name on stuff. It's not like head teacher, you get your name on the report and, or you're kind of in the newspapers or that kind of thing. But I get my pleasure from seeing those head teachers happy. That's where my reward comes from. Or when the Ofsted judgment is given, and it's not about Ofsted, but when the Ofsted judgment is given to teachers and it's a really positive one, that's an amazing moment, isn't it? And I just look round and look at the smiles. Or when, year 6 data, that the whole example, when we sat there on that Tuesday morning and the key stage 2 results came out, and there's a bit of well, not a bit, there's a heck of a lot of nervousness about what that data is going to be, because I knew that data had gone the wrong way. I was without a job. That was just the reality of it. So, when you're shaking hands and looking at the CTF transfer or whatever, and you start adding up because you don't believe what the data system's telling you, it's like, yeah, those are the kind of magic moments, aren't they? Because I don't see the magic moments with the children in the same way as you will. You will see when a child gets something, when a misconception is, eradicated. I don't see that in the same way because I'm not that close to children in the job I do. So I have to get that almost delayed gratification by seeing the teachers happy, seeing the head teacher happy, and seeing this, them achieve their success.
That's really inspiring, just hearing those stories. And what's really inspiring about it as well is, I know a couple of those examples there are about data and pupil outcomes, but like what's come through really, really strongly from our chat, I think, is that kind of definition of success is really like context specific. And I think it might be quite a nice one to wrap up with, which would be like my experience of Chris's school. So I've never actually been to Chris's school, but we went to an event that Chris actually ran. It was a brilliant event last year at some point, and there was some children there from his school. And given the fact that I knew about the context of the school, and I knew about the fact that pretty much everybody that is there with some kind of SEMH need. Just the confidence that these young people had just absolutely blew me away. There was one conversation I had with one of their school governors who was 20. He was a former student who had left by all accounts with no GCSEs because his skills weren't in that kind of academic space. But he was telling me that he'd gone and got himself a trade, and he was looking in the next couple of years to set himself up as working independently. And I was asking him about the school, and he said, "Oh, without a shadow of a doubt, absolutely saved my life." And you think, wow, that is like, imagine like being like the deputy head or the head of a school like that, where the kids go, "Oh yeah, like definitely saved my life," like without doubt. Like that is absolute like success. And I just really like that story. From what I know, it's never been a school that's kind of been failing, but in terms of a school that is just continually moving on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, like wow, it's been really clear on where it's going to, and my goodness, it's definitely got there.
Fantastic.
Oh, you're too kind. But Paul, what you've said has just been so inspiring, because we all sit at the heart of school improvement because our why is the kids, and that is going to be what powers us through. Because now that it's September in 2024, Ofsted no longer have the power of the one-word judgment. What success looks like for school improvement is going to change materially, because we can't be striving for an overall judgment. So it surely has to come back to the why, the very first thing you started speaking about. And I just wondered, as maybe a closing comment, about where you see school improvement going now that we've thankfully lost the arbiter of the flag of where school improvement was going, and how we can get it back to the most important point, which is the why.
I suppose I would, what I'd like to see more than anything is school leaders and teachers being more confident about what they're doing and having faith in, the belief of the journey that they're on. So there's one, if the eradication of the single word judgment has one thing, I'd just like to see head teachers, school leaders and teachers more confident, in doing what they do.
I can't think of a better way to end this podcast. Thank you so much, Paul, for spending your evening with us. It's been Oh, it's been inspirational. And as we said at the beginning, we are listen, haggard might be a dramatic way of putting it, but we are we aren't looking our best. It's hard. So thank you so much for joining us in this recent episode. Adam, do you want to say anything to close out the first episode of our second season? That's very exciting.
Yeah, super exciting. Yeah, Paul, just thanks so much for being our first guest in our second season. And yeah, I feel more energized now than I did at the start of our call. Considering it's an hour and a half later and I haven't had any dinner yet, that is like absolute testament to you. So thanks so much for spending your time with us and for inspiring us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the latest episode of the EduPulse podcast. Why not help broaden the conversation and join us over on social media at EduPulse Co, or sign up to our newsletter at edupulse.co, and we'll see you next time.